Ferrari is preparing for its objective in the start of the 2025 Formula One Championship, to beat McLaren and be competitive right from the first round of the new season, which is scheduled to take place this weekend at the 5.278-kilometer Albert Park Grand Prix circuit in Melbourne on Sunday. A leading role, in short, where maximum attention to every detail will be crucial. Coming out well from the pre-season testing session at the Bahrain circuit was not easy. The Maranello team did not perform poorly, to be clear. However, several issues arose, some expected, others less so. But this is normal, as it is rare for a new car to hit the track and dominate immediately. The Woking team certainly seemed much more prepared at this stage of the preparations. That is undeniable, and it does not mean that the Italian side cannot fight to achieve its target this season. Nevertheless, even the reigning world champions faced some headaches. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella was cautious, stating that during the secure track testing session, they were unable to assess their rivals' performance, and mentioning some balance issues with the car on the second day. The former Ferrari race engineer believes that they are not the favorites, therefore, especially considering last season's approach in the Middle East. It should also be noted that the two MCL38 cars appeared to have masked their performance in Sector 3, relying on an already strong competitiveness without pushing in that section. Based on the data collected from the Bahrain pre-season testing runs, we can clearly notice differences in engine mapping between the two teams that fought for the Formula One Constructors' Championship until the last round of the previous season in Abu Dhabi. Ferrari and McLaren certainly use different power unit modes. If we examine the telemetry we have gathered for this specific comparison, we can easily observe this in the final segments of the 4 straight sections that make up the Bahrain circuit, a stop-and-go track where the ability to accelerate out of the slower corners and display good traction is crucial, along with top-speed performance in the faster sections. In this particular phase of testing, it is evident that Charles Leclerc loses significant speed by as much as 6 kilometers per hour, despite keeping the throttle down for a few more meters than his British counterpart. This behavior could be due to inefficient use of the electric component of the engine at the end of the straights, leading to a loss of 0.04 seconds per acceleration phase. When summed across the relevant sections of a lap, this results in an overall performance loss of about 0.2 per lap. Various telemetry data suggest that Charles Leclerc was running with more weight than Lando Norris for 2 possible reasons: more fuel on board, or the use of ballast for specific tests, as former Ferrari driver Carlos Sainz himself suggested. First, in the snake section formed by turns 5, 6, 7, despite the Ferrari driver lifting off the accelerator at the same level as Lando Norris, or even less, he loses much more speed, up to 14 kilometers per hour in mid-corner. If the aerodynamic balance were similar, this loss could only be justified by the greater weight of the car, which hampers direction changes and inertia during load transfers. Secondly, it is very evident that when exiting each corner, especially turns 1, 4, 11, 13, and 14, Ferrari's speed curve is consistently lower than McLaren's, even though both drivers apply the throttle at the same time. In other words, Ferrari struggles to achieve the same speed increase. There could be 2 reasons for this: a very limited use of the ERS, not only at the end of the straights, but also in traction, or once again, more fuel or ballast on board. On this point, it is important to highlight that just 4 kilograms more implies a loss of 0.100 seconds per lap, while 10 kilograms mean a deficit of 0.250 seconds. While analyzing the telemetry data, we notice the Ferrari driver shows a higher degree of aggression than Lando Norris. In turn 13, with this move, Charles Leclerc may have been executing a specific instruction from the Maranello team's engineers in order to put more stress on the tires. Indeed, the Ferrari driver tackles this section almost flat out, practically on every lap since the first stint, which of course is not ideal in terms of tire management. The difference in throttle usage is around 20% in full application, which is an interesting data point. Telemetry analysis shows that despite the acceleration generated by the Italian car being almost identical to that of the British single-seater, Charles Leclerc demands much more mechanical grip from his tires. This effectively suggests greater stress on them. As mentioned, if this was part of a deliberate Ferrari strategy to test tire endurance over long runs, it would explain the gap in lap times and wear. However, it could also be the result of a stiffer setup, with the driving style used to compensate for the performance loss. The Bahrain pre-season testing session therefore did little to clarify the competitive landscape ahead of the season's first race in Australia. While McLaren demonstrated strong pace over long runs, the extent to which weather conditions influence performance remains uncertain, and hopefully the SF25 car will be able to reduce the gap at the Albert Park circuit. Additionally, the true potential of Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, and McLaren may not have been fully revealed, as teams often conceal their strengths during testing. Speculation has surrounded Charles Leclerc's recent interviews in which he has adopted a notably restrained stance. Rather than expressing clear optimism or concern, he has avoided making any definitive statements. Some have interpreted his reserved demeanor as disappointment, but it is more likely a deliberate effort to temper expectations and minimize external pressure on Ferrari. Speaking to Sky Italy, the Monegasque driver reiterated his long-term focus, emphasizing that the ultimate objective remains the championship title. He refrained from making specific predictions, highlighting the unpredictability of translating preseason testing into race performance. He pointed out that initial impressions can often be misleading, as real-world conditions may differ significantly from expectations. To illustrate this, he cited Red Bull's trajectory from the 2024 Formula One Championship, when the team led by Christian Horner appeared dominant at the start of the season, yet ultimately finished behind Ferrari in the constructors' standings. His message underscored the importance of patience and level-headedness, recognizing that a demanding season of 24 Grands Prix and 6 sprint races lies ahead, regardless of how events unfolded in just a few days at the Melbourne circuit. Ever since Ferrari announced at the beginning of February 2024 that Lewis Hamilton would be joining the team, excitement and expectation have been growing among the Tifosi. Ferrari narrowly missed out on ending their long wait for a championship last season, but their fans would love nothing more than to see either Charles Leclerc or Lewis Hamilton end that drought this year. The arrival of Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari sees the Monegasque facing his toughest task so far, even if the British driver's form did begin to suffer last season, particularly in qualifying. Lewis Hamilton will only discover over the coming months whether it was him or the car that was the issue, but he's done everything in his power to integrate at Ferrari as quickly as possible over the past 6 weeks. The Albert Park Street Circuit is located near the business district of Melbourne in Australia and has returned to its original slot of being the season opener for the first time since the race was cancelled in 2020 due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Only a few select teams have won the Australian GP over the previous editions of the race. Similarly, only a few engine manufacturers have managed to power the winning car to victory. Ferrari is the most successful team at the Australian Grand Prix since it was held at Melbourne, with a total of 10 victories at the circuit. McLaren has won at least 6, with Mercedes on 5, and Red Bull and Renault on 2 apiece. That means only 5 manufacturers have won at Melbourne in the last 20 years.